Hi, Shad.
Hello, Frank.
It's really nice to talk to you today. And I wanted to talk to you especially about the Palestine bid for statehood. We're hearing things about it like pretty much every day. And there are a few key countries, part of the G8. We know like there's roughly around 150 countries that have recognized Palestine as a state already. But the G8 countries have been like really sort of reticent to do so. But in the last few weeks, few months, we've heard from France, from Canada, from Australia, potentially from the UK, and we'll discuss the UK in more detail, um, to recognize Palestine as a state when the UNGA, so the UN General Assembly, sort of reconvenes in September. Um, a lot of people seem to think this is something really, really positive. And I think we'll talk about this, but we could find some positives. But yeah, I like the way you did that. But like, I'll push you hard on this. But anyway, you wrote a piece with a comrade of ours, Noura Erekat, called "The Statehood Trap" for Jadalia. So why do you think this statehood, like this push for statehood right now, is actually a trap?
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Frank. And uh, how do you think it's a trap? It's on multiple levels. First of all, this comes in a time in the middle of an ongoing genocide. And what we are expecting from states is not a piece of paper that says we recognize you as a state, but rather actual state obligations vis-a-vis the ongoing genocide. Under international law, these states, and I'm very critical of international law, but even under these very, very minimal standards, states have the duty to cooperate to end the illegal to end the illegal occupation of Palestine. They have the duty not to recognize any illegal effects of it. And most importantly, they have the duty to prevent genocide, which means that really what we're looking from states now is to impose an arms embargo, an energy embargo, to cut diplomatic relations, to make genocide simply unprofitable. That is their duty. So, in the middle of all of this, and in the middle of the most shameful global position you could ever imagine, in the face of a starving population where you have hunger games being played out for the distribution of aid, where you have an army of amputated people, for the most developed economies in the world to come in and say that, oh, we would like to ignore all of our third state duties. We would like to ignore all of our privilege and capacity and offer the Palestinians this symbolic recognition. So that's one aspect of the problem. Another aspect of the problem is the fact that what is statehood and who is prioritizing this agenda? The Palestinian Authority is the one prioritizing this agenda and not the Palestinian people. And there's a very big difference between the two. The Palestinian Authority was brought about by simply breaking the will of the Palestinian people over generations. It's a decoy government. And a very corrupt one, and one that is very much invested in its own interests. And we've seen that very, very clearly throughout the genocide. And as someone who's worked quite closely on the agenda of trying to get states to adhere to their responsibilities, all that we've seen from the Palestinian Authority was a pushback whenever it doesn't serve its interests or the money that would come from the European Union. So while we were pushing for third state responsibility, and actually this can very much be clearly seen a few weeks ago in Bogota, where the Hague Group states came together to meet in order to push forward their third state responsibilities. Meanwhile, in a parallel move, the Palestinian Authority was meeting with European state over exactly this point. And this meeting can only be understood as a way of saying that we give you statehood and in return, statehood, as well as some money, as well as giving you back the money that Israel is withholding from you. And in return, what you will get from that is what the Europeans will get from that is let's just overlook the sanctions stuff. Let's just forget about that. And this is the consistent position we've seen from European states, which is that we would like to do everything in order to forget the fact that we have to disrupt global value chains of weapons, of energy, of the tech industry, in order to save 2.2 million people. And they wouldn't really like to do that. So it became very ironic to see that in this moment when we're pushing for real responsibility, real obligations, the Palestinian Authority is, instead of coming in to support, instead of pushing on that agenda in this moment, really puts the stakes out for a recognition of statehood. So, if anything, this just reminds us of the trauma of the Oslo Accords. And on that, there's the third worst thing about this, which is that the Palestinians do not agree in their majority on the two-state solution. It was a partition plan that the Palestinians were never consulted on. So to ask Palestinians to, in this moment where they've given up, where the lives of tens of thousands have been given towards this cause, this justice that everyone is seeking, to tell people that no, we would like to give up on that dream, in not only in that level but on multiple other levels. And this is not just something that is moral or an imaginary of justice. Under international law, the Palestinian people have the right of return to what we nowadays call Israel. And that was a condition for the recognition of the state of Israel in the resolution that recognized that it's a peace-loving state at its in the 1940s. So when we think about it in that light, adding to that reparations are also the rights of Palestinians, and these rights are inherited. So that means when you actually want to think about what return and reparations being pillars of Palestinian self-determination, and millions of Palestinians, an estimated of 11 million Palestinians, are outside of Palestine, living in refugee camps, waiting for these rights. We are looking at a fundamental change in the legal structure of the State of Israel, as well as a change in the economic structure of that state in a way that allows just redistribution of resources. And the saying that, well, we recognize a Palestinian state right next to an Israeli state is just simply foregoing that these important pillars of Palestinian self-determination, and making it as if, oh, we give you statehood, it's self-determination, and it's really not even 5% of the story.
Yeah, thanks, Shahd. I want to comment on this a bit further, actually, because you wrote in this piece with Noura that the statehood bid now stands to reward Israel by saving it from itself. Do you mean that we have actually reached a stage in the sort of public opinion and stuff where finally we are actually discussing a lot more what one state means, what a Jewish state means? Can a Jewish state be democratic? Can it be anything else than apartheid? But so are you saying that in a way the statehood bid pushes everything aside and then just say to Israel, you can be this like Jewish state, apartheid state next to another state? Is that what you meant when you wrote that? Or
yeah, so what we meant is actually what Israel is doing now is shooting itself in the foot. It's getting way much more extreme, while the Europeans keep on offering it jail-free cards. And this is yet another jail-free card to Israel, telling it that, okay, actually you have committed a genocide, your occupation is illegal. Instead of recognizing really the extent of Palestinian rights, what we're going to do is that we're going to offer you this demilitarized state that is run by a decoy government that you can control and that you already know that you will be able to control. And this is really not. This is a continuation of colonial policy by European states. This is exactly, for example, what happened when the Congo, for example, gained its independence. But what the government does is, what colonial powers would do is, instead of allowing people to determine, to self-determine, and also to respond to any acts of resistance, they're like, you know what? There you go. Have this formal form of independence, and then we'll be able to control your governments in one way or the other, either plant our own or facilitate a ruling class that is just so full of our riches that it will subjugate you themselves. And so it is, of course, an ideal thing for Israel to have a security state of Palestine, not weaponized. And indeed, what the Europeans are trying to say is that the Palestinians will not have a right of resistance. So and adding to that, it will become funded by Gulf states, who will ensure that the whole infrastructure really supports a police state, and that's the imaginary. So indeed, it is a get out of jail free card for Israel. But what Israel is looking at and saying, oh, actually, I don't want that card. I'm actually going to go more extreme, more far right wing, and fulfill my dream of greater Israel. Even though people will accept that I exist as an apartheid state within what I have, but I guess that's how fascism works. You know, you're addicted. They're addicted to the high of killing and displacement and winning, and they believe that they can uphold this forever, regardless of whatever the world tells them, even if they hand them this mediocre halfway through that really fulfills nothing of what the
Yeah.
Palestinians want.
I actually want to comment on that, because what's been incredible to watch is that all these politicians, all these leaders, all the mainstream media saying, like, first, Netanyahu is the problem, as if he disappeared, everything would be rosy and stuff. But secondly, while Netanyahu and his, and his like government are saying out loud every day what the plan is, no Palestinian state, greater Israel, the media and the politicians are always asking, but what's the end game? We don't know what the end game. No one is telling us what's the plan. But so I'd like you to comment on that, but to even go back to as if the plan for a greater Israel was only Netanyahu's plan, as if it was not the plan from the start, and not, from 48 and pre-48, and also made very clear from the start. It was never hidden. So this sort of facade of, like, we don't really know what the plan is incredible.
Absolutely. And it's, you can see it in how Western media is basically portraying, as well as, of course, Gulf media to a degree, is portraying what is happening in Palestine. And this is quite, a prevalent thing in mainstream media, in the sense of, oh, we can only think of it if it's direct, not if it's structural. And in this case, again, that's another get out of jail card that they give to the Israeli community, which is, how about we forget everything and just, take the government as a scapegoat. And even, the logic of international criminal law really builds on this, which is, instead of seeing that the whole system is complicit, or instead of thinking how is it that structural or systematic forms of criminality exist, let's just blame one guy and say that they are the really bad guy. They are the criminal, pedophile, everything is in them. And adding to that, of course, is colonial erasure. Up until now, European states are just simply, and I see that with a lot of liberal people I speak to, it's as if it still hasn't clicked that this is a settler colonial project premised on the ethnic cleansing of people, and the narrative that it has, in the sense of calling indigeneity of Jewish people is in this land is but one strand of a religion, and cannot be a claim for mass displacing a whole population and committing genocide, unless you are, I don't know, unless you really believe in this apocalyptic vision, like Judge Sibetonde, who believes that Israel is now facilitating the end of times alongside conceptualization of it. And it's hilarious when you also think that this is a very niche interpretation of Judaism that was really propagated after 1967 with Israel's win of the land. And now secular Jewish people, as well as Christian Zionists, are the ones to defend it. Meanwhile, more Orthodox Jews, especially, for example, here in Canterbury, these few weeks, we have a lot of Orthodox Jewish families. They actually find that narrative to be quite offensive for their own religion. And to forego or to because of what Zionism has creating this very great narrative of why is it so normal to commit a genocide and ethnic cleansing, Europeans really base on that. But not only that, they also base on a very racialized perception of, they're like us. They're definitely not committing these barbaric things, they're European just like us. They would never really be doing apartheid or genocide, and we will always defend them. And Judith Butler does a really great job of really saying how when you associate with someone, their life becomes more grievable. And indeed, this is the case with Europeans. They're always willing to give an excuse to the Israelis to completely do whatever they want. And it's true that's the whole state project. It's a military state premised on the accumulation of capital. It's been an imperial outpost, and it hasn't just been doing this in Palestine, has been doing this all across the region. Syria, Lebanon, it really played a big role in Iraq as well, and Egypt. So I don't know how we still live in a world where we have to actually overcome the distortion of truth that has happened and just seeing things for what they are. It's plain, clear playbook colonialism.
And like actually following up on this, so how important is it to engage with like Israel's genocide in Gaza after October 2023, but in the context of the ongoing Nakba and also Zionist settler colonialism? How important it is to have this kind of narration in place for people to understand that this is not just one, like, whatever, accident or something.
So to presume good faith in the state of Israel is to deny the history of the Palestinian people and to deny the history of colonization in total. And it's important not just because it tells us a lot about Palestine, it tells us a lot about the history of the world that we live in, that really has managed to normalize mass land grab, has managed to normalize different levels of being human. And it still baffles me that we are able to think of the genocide without thinking of the Nakba, and also without thinking of colonization more generally as, the imposition of domination and subjugation from a foreign entity on a people for the purpose of the extraction of resources, as well as the dispossession and taking of their land and resources. And to not understand Israel as an imperial outpost that facilitates the interests of imperial powers in one of the most oil-rich areas in the world, as well as a hub in the middle of it. The fact that Israel's existence has allowed a continuous tension in the area, and that was fraught for warfare, is, I don't know how that could skip. How can that be skipped from the narrative? And what also always shocks me is that people forget that 80% of the people of Gaza are legally refugees. And these people have the right of return to what we now call Israel. But that also means that these people have been living in dispossession for so long across generations that their life still hasn't manifested. And of course, over 50% of the population of Gaza are children. So they're committing a genocide against a place that is 50% children. Why? Because these people have been so afraid of ethnic cleansing that they have actually, that the younger populations there, and we all feel it. We feel that there is an attack on who we are. Our identity is always something that we hold on very deeply to, and to not see that to not understand even the whole context of Gaza. And what the media is really trying to do at all times is, oh, there is a bunch of Islamist terrorists playing on the de-association of, oh, these are others who really just love violence and really are, just want to destroy everything European and everything quote unquote civilized, and that's it. And really, without placing it right at the heart of things, of course things will seem confusing to people. Of course, this bid would sound like, oh, there you go, they established what they wanted, which is to get a state. But in reality, yeah, we're still very far off from anything.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we haven't really commented on the kind of absurd UK position. And I mean, Keir Starmer and his government have been abysmal in terms of, in the last 2 years. I mean, his position is kind of like, watch out, Israel, I will recognize Palestine if you don't get to a ceasefire. But so what does it mean? Like, does it mean that if they get to a ceasefire, the UK will never recognize Palestine? It doesn't make any sense. And legally, there's no ground to anything. But anyway, so I'm not sure if you want to comment on that, but I wanted to ask you what you thought about people that say that recognizing Palestine reaffirms the rights Palestinians already have, in a way, the obligation states have towards them as a people, and in a way can potentially be a positive step in contributing to like the remedy of Israel's violation of the right to self-determination. What would you respond to say that, to this kind of assertion?
So it is indeed one way or the other a step forward to recognize Palestinian statehood, because with that comes the recognition of territorial integrity. It comes the recognition of the capacity to negotiate treaties and whatnot. So it is in one way or the other, even though, let's say, actually multiple European states did recognize Palestinian statehood at some point and then revoked it. And then also we have more than 100, I think 20 states who already recognize the state of Palestine. So it's really just previously colonizing states currently at the top of the food chain, coming in to use that as a political tool to recognize what already is supposed to have existed. The Treaty of Lausanne in 1920s did recognize the state of Palestine. The state of Palestine was there under the Ottoman Empire and all of that. What's really scary about it, before I go, it's scary. It is good in a sense of it allows more of a foothold for Palestine. But what we're really trying to say is to sound the red alert of a lesson that we have inherited from all of the other decolonial movements, which is, do not be fooled that if you get a seat in the United Nations General Assembly, that you actually have a voice. And also, who gets to sit on that seat? In the Bogota discussions, they said, "Oh, there are Palestinians in the room," and they barred us out of speaking in that room because we have a representative. Who's our representative? The Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian Authority is not our representative, and not only that. So the doctrine of statehood actually doesn't have anything to say when is statehood used as a political maneuvering tool to negotiate with a colonial entity. Like, that doesn't exist, because statehood is supposed to be straightforward. If you have people, if you have a government, if you have a territory, then that's it. It's supposed to be a state. But then here, recognition is weaponized in favor of Israel. But now it became like this distraction mechanism, so to speak, of saying that we will give you something, but then we will control it. And that is really our fear of that. So of course we want a state. Of course it's one step forward. Of course we want to have, even though we actually do have statehood under international law, and we're already in the International Criminal Court, we already made it to the International Court of Justice, we already have diplomatic representation. It would just mean further symbolic protection for our rights, and it's not like our existing rights are being protected, or that there will be extra representation for it. So yes, I do agree, but it's 5%, and it comes with a very big warning of don't be fooled. And I just want to also side note that when you read European international lawyers' books about self-determination, they actually say that very much, which is self-determination is getting a state and democracy. And then you're like, actually, self-determination is ending colonization, getting the people sovereignty over their natural resources. And that's the narrative that the decolonization movements in the 1960s and 70s really strongly reiterated in the Declaration of Friendly Relations, as well as the new International Economic Order, documents that have been buried ever since. And they were trying to warn us in history that that's what self-determination is premised on, is holding your economy in your hands, having your rights recognized. And so it's the fear of really being fooled once again, and not listening to a historical lesson that was really strongly reiterated by our ancestors.
Thanks a lot, Shahd. I've got one last question for you. You've touched upon it a little bit, and talking about the Hague Group and the Bogota conference. But so if the statehood bid doesn't really advance Palestinian rights at all, and even more so, I mean, we know the statehood bid is not going to stop the genocide in Gaza. What should states do? States that really want to help stop the genocide, what should they do? And in a way, what they are, under international law, obligated to do?
Well, in short, it's make the genocide and the illegal occupation unprofitable. Technically speaking, we are now in August. So according to international law, in September, states should have presented to the United Nations General Assembly what are all of the measures that they've taken to end the illegal occupation of the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. And indeed, now we know that it has been nothing. When we really want to imagine the what the International Court of Justice said in July 2024, we find that Israel is in violation of multiple what we call preemptory norms of international law, which is like the highest rated rules of international law: self-determination, prohibition against apartheid and racial discrimination, prohibition against aggression. And these are so bad because and considered to be preemptory norms of international law, because when you breach them, you break international peace and security. And that's a very logical rule. You know, if you're committing apartheid or genocide, you're most likely feeding into, and that's what, for example, the Nazi regime did when they committed a genocide. They were not only threatening the Jewish population of Europe or the other minorities, they were also threatening the whole of international peace and security by subjugating a whole population. So states, in response to that, have very strong, what we call erga omnes obligations to protect that population. And Francesca Albanese's next report is actually going to be on how states miserably failed. So the steps are very clear. First of all, is just stop sending the weapons, stop allowing their transfer, and stop buying the weapons. Israel has sold record number of weapons this year. Why? Because it has been using and experimenting them on the people of Gaza, and actually showcasing that. We've seen the commercial videos coming out of that, and then it's being bought by other states. The transfer, and also, of course, that goes for energy. Egypt just last week signed a $35 billion dollars contract to get gas from Israel, and that gas is in violation of the Palestinian people's right of sovereignty over their natural resources. Then after that, we have other things, which is states should undertake a review, a due diligence of all of their economic activities, and to ensure that these activities don't further enrich Israel's capacities to further take the occupation forward. And that's quite extensive. And now we're actually working on developing a guideline for states how to do it. Hopefully it will be published by BDS, but these things take a long time to materialize. Last week I was actually in the north of Ireland, and we were trying to guide political parties how to do it. And there are ethical procurement guidelines that they're trying to push forth. But really, when we talk about sanctions, sanctions are a peaceful, non-violent way to end a major violations. It's actually taking weaponizing interdependence and globalization in a way that allows us to end things when people are under grave danger. What's happening now is the other way around, which is that sanction regimes are being weaponized in order to stop any support for the oppressed people by the US. Even today, they put sanctions against more judges of the International Criminal Court. Meanwhile, the other way, the sanctions that should be imposed are not being imposed. And here we should really differentiate when we talk about sanctions. And we were really thinking about this of how do we advise global South states on taking things forward, because there's a difference somehow, like using very global South terminology. There is imperial violence and anti-imperial violence. And if we think of sanctions as a form of violence, then only when it's against the interests of accumulation of power and the subjugation and domination of people are they supposed to be lawful. Of course, ending diplomatic relations is something that we're asking of states, unseating Israel from the UN General Assembly, and for states to cooperate on other resolutions and multilateral efforts to do that. But really what we're asking is it will put a very big effect on the global value chain of things, because Israel is really at the heart of a lot of things. So at some point, also, this is an anti-capitalist ask that is also feeds into the same line of argumentation of people who are asking for environmental protection, people who are asking us as a humanity to stop and think of what types of value chains we're pushing forward. One of the main reasons why the genocide is not stopping is because it makes profit not just for Israel, but for the military and energy industries all across the globe, and it burns excess value. So unless we reckon with that larger thing, and it's an advice generally to people to make sure that they instrumentalize and use the weapons of international law, because now you have strong international legal premises, indisputable, within the most liberal language that you could ever imagine, asserting that that is the only way forward. And if we are managed to establish consensus to do that in the world, we perhaps could be on the verge of something bigger, which is a global movement for social justice, something that is representative of the sound of the majority over the sound of the minority.
What a perfect way to end our conversation, Shahd. Thanks a lot, and this was very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.